تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض ولم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك وخلق كل شيء فقدره تقديرا. سلام. واتخذوا من دونه آلهة لا يخلقون شيئا وهم يخلقون. سلام سلام. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. ولا يملكون لأنفسهم ضرا ولا نفعا ولا يملكون موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. Inshallah, I will reply. You sure it was an email or wasn't it it wasn't a DM on TikTok? Because I did look at it, but I just haven't had a chance to reply. I think it was a DM. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. قد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين وقال الذين. Are you emailed? I have to look again. I'm trying to think if I've seen that. Inshallah, I'll look at it. Yeah, alhamdulillah, it's very beautiful. I decided to come out and be in nature today. وقال الذين كفروا إن هذا إلا إفك افتراه وأعانه عليه قوم آخرون. Inshallah, I'll take a look at it for sure. فقد جاءوا ظلما وزورا وقالوا أساطير الأولين اكتتبها. وعليكم السلام. Kay, what's going on? فهي تملى عليه بكرة وأصيلا قل أنزله الذي يعلم السر في السماوات والأرض. سلام. إنه كان غفورا رحيما. وقالوا ما لهذا الرسول يأكل الطعام ويمشي في الأسواق لولا أنزل إليه ملك فيكون معه نذيرا. Yes, I was Salafi. That is true. أو يلقى إليه كنز أو تكون له جنة يأكل منها. وقال الظالمون إن تتبعون إلا رجلا مسحورا. انظر كيف ضربوا لك الأمثال فضلوا فلا يستطيعون سبيلا. وعليكم السلام إيزي. تبارك الذي إن شاء جعل لك خيرا من ذلك جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ويجعل لك قصورا بل كذبوا بالساعة وأعتدنا لمن كذب بالساعة سعيرا. وعليكم السلام. إذا رأتهم من مكان بعيد سمعوا لها تغيظا وزفيرا. سلام نادية, what's going on? وإذا ألقوا منها مكانا ضيقا مقرنين دعوا هنالك ثبورا. لا تدعوا اليوم ثبورا واحدا وادعوا ثبورا كثيرا. قل أذلك خير أم جنة الخلد التي وعد المتقون. وعليكم السلام. كانت لهم جزاء ومصيرا لهم فيها ما يشاءون خالدين كان على ربك وعدا مسئولا ويوم يحشرهم وما يعبدون من دون الله فيقول أأنتم أضللتم عبادي هؤلاء أم هم أضلوا السبيل قالوا سبحانك ما كان ينبغي لنا أن نتخذ من دونك من أولياء. Rose Peach, salam. Yep, I figured I'd be out in nature today. We haven't did it live out here in a little while. We've been cooped up in the library. Rose Peach, yeah, for sure. For sure, Kate. Oh, this is Surah 25, verse 18. من أولياء ولكن متعتهم وآباءهم حتى نسوا الذكر وكانوا قوما بورا. Inshallah, we read to the... Yeah, for sure. You got to get out a little bit, man. Do something different, man. Inshallah, we read to the end of the page, and then we'll start. فقد كذبوكم بما تقولون فما تستطيعون صرفا ولا نصرا ومن يظلم منكم نذقه عذابا كبيرا. الحمد لله عزيزتي, مرحبا بك. الحمد لله. وما أرسلنا قبلك من المرسلين إلا إنهم ليأكلون الطعام ويمشون في الأسواق وجعلنا بعضكم لبعض فتنة أتصبرون وكان ربك بصيرا. What does my shirt say? If you find me offensive, then I suggest you quit finding me. Scroll past, bro. Scroll past. You ain't got to stay here. It's enough of us, that like being here. We can stay here. Find me offensive, keep it moving, bro. Yeah. Nah, that's one of my favorite shirts. I like this shirt. So today, inshallah, we're going to look at just, I think, a good reminder. I'm going to look at these verses here in chapter 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, verses 27 up to verse 32. So we're going to discuss chapter 5, 27 to 32. But you know how our discussions are. These verses are going to take us all over the place. But that's going to be our basis. That's where we're going to read from today, inshallah. And I think these verses are just a really good reminder, very inspirational. And I think they have a lot of lessons to teach us. What does it say? Oh, it says, if you find me offensive, then I suggest you quit finding me. Fasten your seatbelts. Right. Exactly. We're gonna go all over the place. This the Quran dark web, like Noor said. So what you think you understand about these verses, we're gonna completely flip that. We're gonna be looking at these verses in a completely different way. And that's not to say, when we do that, when we look at verses or when we look at words in different ways, the dark web that takes us to the light, yeah, like the seed in the darkness. See, subhanAllah, Allah. That's why that analogy is beautiful that you use, Noor, because the Quran uses the analogy of a seed being in the darknesses of the earth, right? Marriage from God we choose. Ourselves search, yeah, because he says, وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ, nor a seed in the darknesses of the earth. So a seed starts off in the darknesses of the earth. right? So you have to go through the darkness in order to grow, right? Even when Allah describes what He does with us, He says, "Yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumat ila nur." He brings from the darknesses to the light, right? He doesn't say that you start off in the light; you start off in the darknesses and you come to the light, right? So that's a very good analogy, like the dark web. I love it. It's beautiful. So these verses, let's read these verses real quick. These are verses that probably most of us have heard many times if we've been around Islam any amount of time, or even from the biblical version. But we want to like kind of look at them a little bit differently today. So first we'll just read through them, and I'll just give you, I want to start with, as I read them, the traditional kind of explanation for them, and then kind of go back and like dig through the words a little bit more and like see if we can think about it a little bit differently. So this is the story of, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, of the two sons of Adam. So he says, "Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Huda." What's going on? So he says, I'm early. No, this is my normal time. 5 Eastern is the time I shoot for. But sometimes early it would be like 4 or 3. But I usually shoot for 5. What's going on, Huda? So this is my normal time. How long will it be? We'll see. We'll see how it goes. At least an hour. I usually shoot for an hour, but maybe more. It depends on how much we cover. So anyway, he says here, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ بَنِي آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ إِذْ قَرَّبَا قُرْبَانًا فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ قال إنما يتقبل الله من المتقين لئن بسطت إلي يدك لتقتلني ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين إني أريد أن تبوء بإثمي وإثمك فتكون من أصحاب النار وذلك جزاء الظالمين فطوعت له نفسه قتل أخيه فقتله فأصبح من الخاسرين. وعليكم السلام, Inspo. AOQCW, I was just talking about you yesterday, bro. Not you personally, but your Jinsuk. I was telling my dude about how you guys like spam that same comment. I was telling a friend of mine about it because he's not a TikTok person. Yeah, I was just talking about you. Glad you can join us. فبعث الله غرابا يبحث في الأرض ليريه كيف يواري سوءة أخيه. Oh, that's the other one. Try to eat pork. I think you guys got like a little book, right? Of like, this is what you say to rage bait Muslims. Bro, I converted, so I've eaten pork. I didn't stop eating pork because I didn't like it. I don't know where you guys got that from. But you're welcome to join. And oh man, they too funny, bro. Anyway, so let's go back, inshallah. I don't want to take up too much time messing with the rage baiters. فبعث الله غرابا يبحث في الأرض ليريه كيف يواري سوءة أخيه قال يا ويلتى أعجزت أن أكون مثل هذا الغراب فأواري سوءة أخيه فأصبح من النادمين من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا ولقد جاءتهم رسلنا بالبينات ثم إن كثيرا منهم بعد ذلك في الأرض لمسرفون. So he says, so I'll just give you the translation with kind of like the general traditional explanation, then we're going to go back through it. This is 5:27. Salam, what's up, Jenny? To 32, 27 to 32. He says, yeah, alhamdulillah. That's why I wanted to read it all first before I translate it, because I think it's just so beautiful. Like, even if you're not reciting it like with like tajweed and tartil, like just to read through the ayat is just like, it in and of itself is beautiful. So he says, this is 5:27 to 32. He says, recite upon them the news of the two sons of Adam with truth, when they both offered an offering, and it was accepted from one of them, and it was not accepted from the other. He said, I will kill you. He said, I'm reading it exactly how it says. He said, that's why I'm just reading it literally so you can see how it sounds literally. He said, Allah only accepts from al-muttaqeen. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you extend your hand to me to kill me, I will not extend my hand to kill you. Truly, I fear Allah, the Lord of the worlds. I intend that you draw upon yourself my sin and your sin, and you become of the companions of the fire. And that is the recompense for the al-zalimin, the wrongdoers or the oppressors. So his nafs, fatawwa'at lahu nafsuhu, is hard to translate, but like his nafs made him comply or consent to the killing of his brother. So he killed him, and he became of the losers. So Allah sent a crow searching in the earth to show him how to hide the saw'a of his brother. I'm not going to translate saw'a right now. We'll come back to that. He said, woe to me. He said, woe to me. Am I incapable of not being like this crow? So I would hide the saw'a of my brother, and he became of the regretful. Because of that, we prescribed upon Bani Israel. Hey, what's up, Lexi? The big OG's in the house. What's going on, man? How you doing? Good to see you. Because of that, we prescribed upon Bani Israel that the one who kills a soul, not in recompense for a soul or corruption in the earth, it is as if he killed all of humanity. And the one who brings it to life, a soul to life, it is as if he brought to life all of humanity. And there has come to them our messengers with clear evidences. And then many of them after that are musrifun in the earth. They just act extravagantly, transgress extravagantly in the earth. Or as it could be translated. Okay. The general idea of the story usually, if we go back to the beginning, is recite upon them the news of the two sons of Adam with truth, when they both offered an offering, and it was accepted from one of them, and it was not accepted from the other. He said, I will kill you. Okay. The general understanding of that is usually like, who is the one killing the other in the traditional story? Usually the one killing the other is the one that wasn't accepted. Okay, because he said they both put forward an offering. قَرَّبَ قُرْبَانًا, right? They both put forward a qurban, which qurban is from the root qurb, meaning nearness. So some aspect of nearness to Allah, perhaps. قَرَّبَ قُرْبَانًا, right? فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا. Look at the ambiguity of the words. I want you to listen really closely. Perhaps Allah phrased it like this to open up the possibility that we can see it in different ways. Because he didn't mention the names. We know, like, biblically, they refer to as Cain and Abel, but Allah didn't mention the names. He says, إِذْ قَرَّبَ قُرْبَانًا فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ. It was accepted from one of them, and it was not accepted from the other. قَالَ, he said, لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, I will certainly kill you. Which one said, I will kill you? So the usual explanation is that it's the one who it wasn't accepted from. He became jealous of the one it was accepted from, and he killed him because he was jealous that it was accepted. That's the normal reading of it, okay? But it's vague. The words are kind of vague, right? When it was accepted from one of them, it's not accepted from the other. So that's the first point. The second point is, why specifically did he say, recite upon them the one who perceived his sacrifice wasn't accepted, is usually how it's explained. that was the one who killed the other. The one who sacrificed wasn't accepted, or not sacrifice. His offering, qurban. I don't want to assume it was like a sacrifice, because the word qurban just derives from qurb, nearness. So some act of nearness to Allah, perhaps, right? Because at the end of the verse, he says, "Innama yataqabbalu Allahu min al-muttaqin." Allah only accepts from al-muttaqin, those who have taqwa. So it seems like the qurban being accepted is some kind of like act of like nearness to Allah, an act of worship, something done to draw near to Allah. But the whole verse is vague. It's given to us like in a vague way. Okay, and then when you look at this, the beginning of this, right? Watlu alayhim naba abnei Adama bil haq. Recite upon them the story of the two sons of Adam with truth, right? If you look at this wording, right, I want to give you a comparison. So if you look at this wording, right, we find, for example, in 1071, he says, "Watlu alayhim naba'a Nuhin." Recite upon them the news of Nuh. But he doesn't say bil haq. Watlu alayhim, this is in 2669. Watlu alayhim naba'a Ibrahim. Recite upon them the news of Abraham. Right? He says, "Watlu alayhim naba'a alladhi ataynahu ayatina." Recite upon them the news of the one that we gave our ayats. Okay? So why here does he say, "Watlu alayhim naba'a bnei Adama bil haq"? Why does he say, "Salam, what's up, Kay? Hey, Tasmiya, wa alaikum salam, what's going on? What's going on? You too, Slugger. God bless you too." Why does he say particularly here, bil haq, recite upon it with truth? Like, why doesn't he say, "Watlu alayhim naba'a Nuhin bil haq"? Wa alaikum salam. Recite upon them the story of Noah with truth, right? Why does he say here, recite upon them the story of the two sons of Adam with truth, bil haq, bil haq? Okay, perhaps that's a clue, because maybe, when Allah knows best, what that's telling us is the way that the story is normally told isn't correct, or there's some other parts of the story that the details aren't all the way what Allah wants us to get from it in this chapter. Okay, perhaps, because if you look at, because why did he say bil haq? Recite it to them bil haq, with haq. Does that imply that it's being recited without haq, maybe? Because if you compare this to another place in the Quran. What's up, Evelyn? Hassan, salam, what's going on? If you look at the story of Ashab al-Kahf, right, in 1813. In 1813, he says, even though it doesn't use the word utlu, but this is a good example of perhaps why he says bil haq. And subhanAllah, man, I just want to say one thing real quick before I read this. I'm so glad that we have the vibe. Just the more that I interact with people and the more I watch people's discussions and just interact with people from all different backgrounds, right? I'm so glad that we have the vibe that we say perhaps, and we don't never in our community, like, we don't take the position that, like, with the things that we come up with or the explanations that we have from the Quran is like, this is what it is and there's no other possible way to look at it. Because the more that I interact and the more that I just even observe, just people from different traditions and different backgrounds, the more that I see, like, that way of thinking really makes it difficult to, like, communicate and connect with other people. Good morning. Because even when you're just trying to share things, like, it becomes very difficult, because then it becomes like this thing where each person is, like, just trying to prove the other person wrong, and it's not like a productive discussion. So subhanAllah, man, that really brings me a lot of joy that we have that understanding in this community, that, like, it's, no matter how much we, study and we support, wa alaikum salam, what we're saying, no matter how much we study and support what we're saying with, the Arabic and the other verses in the Quran, we always come back around to, and in the end, Allah knows best. And I think that's the most beautiful and safest position to always take. But anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick because I said perhaps that's what made me think about that. Wa alaikum salam. So here, 1813, he says, نحن نقص عليك نبأهم بالحق. We relate to you their story بالحق, with haq. So particularly about Ashab al-Kahf, he specifically said, we relate to you their story بالحق. And then when you read later in the story, what happened? What do you see in verse 22? You see in verse 22, there's dispute about them. He says, سيقولون ثلاثة رابعهم كلبهم ويقولون خمسة سادسهم كلبهم رجما بالغيب ويقولون سبعة وثامنهم كلبهم قل ربي أعلم بعدتهم ما يعلمهم إلا قليل فلا تماري فيهم إلا مراء ظاهرا ولا تستفتي فيهم منهم أحدا. Right? He says, they will say they are three and the fourth of them was their dog. And they will say they are five and the sixth of them is their dog, guessing with the unseen. And they will say they are seven and the eighth of them is their dog. Say, my Lord knows best their number. None knows them except a few. So these are the people that Allah said in the beginning of the story, نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ. We will narrate to you their story or their news bil-haq, because these are people that are, the story is disputed. People have different ways of who are they? They're the seven sleepers, or are they this person? Are they that person? Could it be the story of two different scenarios? Perhaps. Yeah, perhaps. So my point is just to start with, when we look at Allah saying he's going to narrate or recite upon them the story of different people, like with Noah, he didn't say bil haq, right? With Ibrahim, he didn't say bil haq. But with the two sons of Adam, he says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ بَنِي آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ. Recite upon them the story of the two sons of Adam with haq. And with Ashab al-Kahf, he says, we will narrate to you or upon you their news with haq. And then we read the story that they were disputed about. So that doesn't conclusively prove, obviously, that the way the story is normally told isn't necessarily the most accurate version, but at least does allow us to start to think like perhaps there's other dimensions to this story that hasn't been completely like explored. And maybe, yeah, exactly. Perhaps it wasn't just about the offering. We're going to talk about that more. So we want to explore this. This is the theory that we want to explore tonight, inshallah. We want to explore the theory that the one who killed the other wasn't the one whose sacrifice wasn't accepted. It was actually the one who sacrificed. Now I keep saying sacrifice. Whose offering? I'm sorry. See, even sometimes, bro, the preconceived learning permeates your brain, and it's difficult. Like to you have to keep reminding yourself, like, hold on, don't make that assumption. Yeah, it just sticks. So the theory that we want to look at and say, of course, perhaps, but it's a theory about these verses. It's a theory about these verses. It's a theory about these verses that, if you think about it, it completely changes the field of the verses, and it changes how these verses fit into the surah itself. Because remember, this is the surah Al-Ma'idah, is the surah that says, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. This, today I have perfected for you your deen. So this surah positions us in a place where we're thinking about the deen, this set of laws and regulations, this way of life that we try to, alhamdulillah, that we try to adhere to. It positions us in this place of thinking like we have this kamal, we have this completeness, and that could cause arrogance, right? When you feel that you have a complete, system of living, that can cause some arrogance, because now you can look at other people and think that if they don't follow this particular way, then they're incomplete, and then that could cause that could cause arrogance and fighting, and exactly salam, exactly what we see now, right? So that a different way to possibly look at this story, and perhaps it was phrased like this intentionally. This is one of the beauties of the Quran, I think, is the language is so poetic that it offers various perspectives. It offers various ways to look at it. One of the reasons why I love sections like this, when you start to dig into it, your mind shifts to like a whole different perspective. One of the reasons I like it is, I don't know if you guys ever saw this. If you didn't, look this up. You can look it up right now and see what I'm talking about. So there is a picture that they use in psychology to demonstrate how perception can change, and it's a picture of an old lady and a young woman. And if you look at this picture, it's a drawing, it's not a real picture, but if you look at this picture, once you see both of them, your mind can toggle back and forth between them. You can see, depending on how you look at the picture, it looks like an old lady, and depending on how you look at it, it looks like a young woman, right? It can go either way. And that's what I love about certain places like this in the Quran. It's like your mind can see both. Like you can see the traditional, okay, I can see how they're what they're saying. Yeah, but once you look at the ayat from a different angle, your mind can flip and say, "Oh wow," but you can see that too. And which one is right? Which one is in that picture? Is it the old woman, or is it the young lady? Right? They're both. Salam, they're both in the picture. It just depends on how you see it. And I think, like, to a large degree, the Quran is similar to that. That which one is the verse saying? Both. You can see both of them in there, right? It's just all about how you use the perspective. And I think this perspective that I'm talking about today is a perspective that reminds us the necessity of not becoming self-righteous, because this surah speaks about akmaltu lakum dinakum. I I've given you this complete deen, this complete system. And that the danger of that, and especially even if you look at it from an Islamic history standpoint, even though I'm not mentioning that because that's debatable, but it depends on like how you look at it. But from an Islamic history standpoint, some would say like that's one of the last things to be revealed, obviously, because he completed it, right? So if you think about it even from that standpoint, the Muslims after they've grown through all these different periods of trials and suffering and all that different stuff, and now we have this completeness. Now we're in this position of maybe power, or we're the people that's the heads. Wa alaikum salam. Now there's a temptation to become arrogant, and we see that now. That's why this lesson is so relevant. We see that now. So the other way of looking at these verses, where the one who did the killing wasn't the one who the qurban wasn't accepted from. The one who did the killing was the one who it was accepted from. It was accepted from him. And because of that, he looked at the other person like, because Allah didn't accept this from you, there must be something wrong with you. You must be a sinner. You must be evil. I must eliminate you. If you read the verses again from this perspective, it's very enlightening. وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ بَنِي آدَمَ بِالْحَقِّ. Wa alaikum salam. Recite upon them the news of the two sons of Adam with truth. إِذْ قَرَّبَ قُرْبَانًا. When they both put forward some act of nearness to Allah. فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا. So it was accepted from one of them. وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ. And it wasn't accepted from one of them. قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ. He said, now because the he said comes after this portion, that's why they would think that it's the one that wasn't accepted. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But the point is, it's vague, it's ambiguous, it allows for different perspectives. قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ. He said, I will certainly kill you. Alhamdulillah, it is. قَالَ إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. The one who it wasn't accepted from is telling them, Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen. Perhaps this person is humble. They realize like, okay, Allah didn't accept from me. I got some. We'll see in a second that the person who it wasn't accepted from, if we understand it like that, acknowledges that they have a sin, that they have a, we'll see that in a second, right? Um, but he tells the person that's going to transgress against him, hey, I understand like Allah accepted from you, but Allah accepts from the muttaqeen. You're a person of taqwa. It's not that I'm evil or something. You're a person of taqwa. إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Then he tells him, لَإِن بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي, if you extend your hand to kill me, مَا أَنَا بِبَاسِطٍ يَدِيَ إِلَيْكَ لِأَقْتُلَكَ. Alhamdulillah. Good to see you too. Right? If you extend your hand to me to kill me, I won't extend my hand to kill you. Right? Inni akhafu Allah, Rabbil Alameen. I fear Allah, Rabbil Alameen. Now that part right there, people would think, well, that means that the person is this person is someone who fears Allah, etc. Because he says, I fear Allah, so it means like he's righteous, that type of stuff. But in actuality, Iblis also, Shaitan also said this same phrase. So that doesn't negate that this person could have been someone that it wasn't accepted from, right? Inni akhafullaha rabbil alameen. Because this same phrase was said somewhere else by Shaitan, right? Yeah, inshallah, we're gonna keep reading. Inni akhafullaha rabbil alameen. Then he says, Inni uridu an tabu'a bi ithmi wa ithmika. He said, I intend that you draw on yourself my sin and your sin. You draw upon yourself my sin and your sin. Ithmi wa ithmika. So if this is the person who it wasn't accepted from. Okay, let's think about this again. He says, I intend to draw upon myself. I seen that almost happened, man. That was good driving. Yeah, I seen that, bro. That was crazy, man. Yeah, so let's think through this again. So the person that it wasn't accepted from is telling him, if you extend your hand to kill me, I won't extend my hand to kill you. I fear Allah Rabbil Alameen. Inni uridu an tabu'a bi ithmi, that you draw upon yourself with my sin and your sin. Okay? Why is he saying my sin? If it's the other person, what sin did he commit? So that supports that. Allah knows best, but this is another perhaps angle to support that the person that's speaking is the one that it didn't have it accepted, because he's acknowledging I have a sin. Otherwise, what's the sin of the one that the sacrifice was accepted, or the qurban was accepted? You follow me? If the person that's speaking was the one that it was accepted, and he's telling the other one, you're going to draw upon yourself my sin. What was his sin in the context? What was his sin? He's acknowledged to be then from the muttaqeen, right? So what sin would he have committed? So it actually makes a little bit more sense, right? That the ithm, like the person that's speaking is the one that the sacrifice wasn't accepted, because he's acknowledging I'm a sinner. That's why, because he said, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen. So he's acknowledging I'm a sinner, right? He's saying my sin and your sin. Then he says, فَتَكُونَ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ النَّارِ وَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ الظَّالِمِينَ. And you would be from the companions of the fire, and that is the recompense of al-zalimin, of the oppressors. Yeah, they both had a sin, because we can say that. See, that's what we have to be careful about, though, because we can obviously say like, well, everyone's a sinner. But when we look at the Quran, we have to be more precise than that. What's the point of Allah specifically mentioning a sin with that person? Because yeah, we can assume everyone's a sinner, right? But my point is, like, when you look at certain pieces, like no one piece like completely says or proves or establishes like, oh, we can look at the story like in a different way. But when you put all the pieces together, it's a really good or interesting like shift in perspective when you think about it like that. Like, why specifically does Allah mention this person acknowledging that they had a sin. That I'm not going to extend my hand for you, right? I'm not going to extend my hand towards you to kill you, even if you extend your hand to kill me, right? He said, I want you to drop my sin and your sin. After he just told the person, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen. So he's perhaps addressing the person who it was accepted from, who now is becoming self-righteous and wants to kill him because he's like, I must eliminate you. And subhanAllah, one of the reasons why I love this reading of it, this qira'ah of it, this is just a different qira'ah of it. It doesn't make the other qira'ah of it wrong. It's just a reading. It's just a way to think about it. One of the reasons why I think this is such a beautiful way to look at it is because it exactly fits what we see in reality. It's exactly what we see. Most people that I personally know, that you would look at them and you would think, like, from a religious perspective, like they look like a sinner, or they look like they're not the best Muslim, or they're not the most righteous. Those people, honestly, are the best people. Some of the best people I've ever met. Sometimes the worst people are the ones that put on like that religious facade. Not always. Can't say generalize always, but these verses really match what you see in reality, right? If you think about it like that. And then he goes on, he says, فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُهُ قَتْلَ أَخِيهِ. Yeah, for sure. Like some of the best people. Even another reason why I love this too. I mean, just think about, even if you want to think about like hadith or sayings of different scholars, one of the sayings that they have is, they say, a sin might take someone to Jannah and a good deed might take someone to the hellfire. And someone said, how is that? Said, because someone commits a sin and it humbles them, but then another person does a good deed and they become arrogant. So that their good deed takes them to the hellfire, and this person's sin takes them to Jannah, right? And perhaps that's why we see in this story that the person who it wasn't accepted from, who was being violently confronted by the self-righteous person that had their qurban accepted, that's why he's humble. إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. He's telling him, no, don't kill me, bro. Like, you're from the muttaqeen, don't kill me, bro. You're going to take my sin and your sin. Whatever that means. Like, I get what Dr. Boss said, like, no one bears the burden of another. We have to think about, like, what does that mean more? But I'm just saying, my point being is, why did he acknowledge that he had a sin? Right? Why is that wording mentioned? Like, perhaps that shows us, like, don't think that like, because this person doesn't seem like the type of person who Allah would accept his deeds, don't think that person is automatically a bad person that you must eliminate. That person a lot of times will be more humble because they realize how imperfect they are. As opposed to the person who thinks that they have it all figured out, right? He said, فَتَكُونَ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ النَّارِ وَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ الظَّالِمِينَ فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُهُ قَتْلَ أَخِيهِ. This part is beautiful. Perhaps there is a subtle, like, ishara, there's a subtle indication that Allah gives us here about the nature of what's going on here. Because why did he use the verb فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُهُ قَتْلَ أَخِيهِ? فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُهُ. What does that mean? What is the word tawwa'at? Tawwa'at. What does the word tawwa'at come from? Or what is it related to? It's related to the word ta'a. It's related to the word ta'a. Ta'a means obedience. Ta'a means obedience, right? Well, that's what they translate it as. I don't think it actually means that, right? But the word tawwa'at lahu nafsuhu qatla akhihi, his nafs tawwa'at for him the killing of his brother. Why did he say tawwa'at? Why did he use a word that's related to the word that we translate as obedience? Perhaps there is a subtle indication in that of him almost feeling like him feeling the same way about killing his brother like he feels about doing an act of obedience. He feels like this is ta'atullahi wa rasulihi, to kill you, right? Even though that's not, the word ta'a has like different dimensions and different meanings, right? But why did Allah use this word? Because in the story of Yusuf, look at the different word in the story of Yusuf, subhanAllah. In the story of Yusuf, what word is used? It's a different word. When Yaqub addressed the brothers after they left Yusuf, he said, قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم. سولت. That your own selves did taswil, سولت. Okay? سول. He didn't say طوعت. He didn't say طوعت. He said سولت لكم أنفسكم. And what's the difference between the brothers of Yusuf? The brothers of Yusuf knew they were doing something wrong, right? Because if you go back, they said, "Uqtulu Yusuf, kill Yusuf, kill him." And then at the end of it, he said, "Watakunu min ba'dihi qawman salihin." After that, you will be righteous people. So it's like they knew they were doing something wrong because they said, "After it, you'll be righteous people." Perhaps one way to think about that, right? But he used a different word for them. But with this person, he said, "Tawwa'at, tawwa'at lahu nafsuhu, tawwa'at." His nafs made it seem like ta'ah, made it seem like obedience, made him comply with it, made him consent to doing this, right? Qatla akhihi, the killing of his brother. فَقَتَلَهُ, so he killed him. فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ, and he became of the lost, right? فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ, here's the most beautiful part of the whole story. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ غُرَابًا يَبَحَثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيُرِيَهُ كَيْفَ يُوَارِي سَوْءَةَ أَخِيهِ. So the way that they usually think about this or translate this is they say, so Allah sent a crow searching in the earth. They say scratching. يَبْحَثُ, searching. They say scratching. لِيُرِيَهُ كَيْفَ يُوَارِي سَوْءَةَ أَخِيهِ. In order to show him, I believe it was a crow, and I'm going to explain. In order to show him how to conceal the saw'ah of his brother. Okay, the saw'ah of his brother. They say the dead body. We're going to talk about that. قَالَ يَا وَيْلَتَ, he said, woe to me, أَعْجَزْتُ, have I became incapable, أَنْ أَكُونَ مِثْلَ هَذَا الْغُرَابِ, that I would be like this crow, فَأُوَارِيَ سَوْءَةَ أَخِي, so I would conceal the saw'ah of my brother. فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ النَّادِمِينَ, so he became of the regretful. What's the point of the crow? They say the crow showed him how to bury the brother. Crows don't. So crows. If you study crows, and not just crows, but there's other similar, but they have an interesting way that they deal with death, right? Yeah, exactly. Good point, right? They're very smart. They're very intelligent. But do you know what they do when a crow dies? They go and they investigate. They investigate the scene of the murder. That's one of the reasons, standing around, that people probably call them a group of them a murder of crows. They go and investigate the murder, and they try to figure out, basically what happened. Like if they see a person that's near the scene, they associate that person with the death, and they never forget that person's face. If they see a predator, same, right? They investigate so they can protect themselves. So when they go and search the scene of a murder, it's to protect the community, okay? So the point of the crow here, Allah knows best, is not to go and show him how to bury, right? To go and show him how to bury his brother. And the word saw'ah doesn't mean his body. We're going to explain that more. But what the crow, perhaps, because the word is yabhathu, searching. So this person whose qurban was accepted and became self-righteous, he began to search for the flaws of his brother. And searching for the flaws of his brother made him kill his brother. So the crow comes to teach him, no. When you search, your searching should be to conceal the flaws. It should be to protect your brother. But instead, you searched in order to kill your brother. يَبَحَثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيُرِيَهُ كَيْفَ يُوَارِي سَوْءَةَ أَخِيهِ. He came and searched to show how you conceal the evil of your brother. The word saw'ah doesn't mean dead body. The word saw'ah is related or comes from the same root as sayyi'ah, something evil. Su, something evil. Saw'ah, okay? It doesn't mean, subhanAllah, this word has been an abused word in the study of the Quran, because they don't know if it means the private parts. They don't know if it means the dead body. They can't make up their mind. Depends on the place that you read it at, right? Because when you look at this word in another place, salam, Florence. When you look at this word in the story of Adam, right? When you look at this word in the story of Adam, chapter 7, verse 26, he says, see in this part, and also in verse 22, let's read verse 22 first. Actually, let's read verse 20. Let's go back to verse 20. Notice the same wording. So this is in chapter 7, verse 20. He says, this is about Adam and his Zoj. He says, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ لِيُبْدِيَ لَهُمَا مَا وُورِيَ عَنْهُمَا. Wuriya. The same word as yuwari in chapter 5. Yuwari. Oh, there's a difference, yeah, between nadam and toba. Yeah, good point. Good catch. Right? So he says that Shaitan whispered to them both in order to reveal to them what had been wuriya anhuma, what had been concealed from them, min sawatihima. Min sawatihima. They say from their private parts, right? Because the influence of like the Bible and Christianity, they think it's the private parts. But in the Quran, we have another word, awrat. Awrat in nisa. Thalathu awratin lakum. The times when you take off your clothes, he called them thalathu awratin lakum. The times of awrats. The times of vulnerability. Right? Perhaps is one way of thinking about it. Right? Not so at. And how many private parts were they this plural? So at. Not so atehima, not there two private. So at, plural, right? Liyubadiya lahuma ma wuriya anhuma min so atihima. The reason they think, and Allah knows best, that it's private parts is because they always think physical. Everything is physical, right? But the word so at, if we just keep it from its origin in the language, it's from sayya. It's the same root. So at that what did Shaitan want to do is he wanted to bring forth their negative qualities that had been concealed from them. And then if you read to verse 26, he says, Ya bani Adama qad anzalna alaykum libasan yuwari sawatikum. Listen, yuwari sawatikum. Yuwari sawata akhi. Warisha. وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ. ذَلِكَ, and this is in, remember, the story of Adam, and those were the two sons of Adam. See the connection? He says, O children of Adam, we sent down upon you libasan, a covering, yuwari sawatikum, that covers, conceals, hides your sawat, your evil qualities. Warisha. Warisha. What is warish? Rish. Rish in Arabic is rishul ta'ir, the feathers of the bird. So he mentions libas, covering, and he mentions two purposes. Yuwari sawatikum, covers your negative qualities, and rishan becomes like the bird is for adornment, for beautification. Then he says, walibasu taqwa dhalika khayr. And the covering of taqwa, that is goodness. That is khayr. I know they say that is better, but I prefer at this point, and Allah knows best, to translate it as that is goodness. Dhalika khayr. Right? So notice, he mentions two things. He mentions yuwari sawatikum, warisha, and then he said, walibasu taqwa dhalika khayr. Dhalika khayr. Right? The covering of taqwa. So perhaps libasu taqwa is ma yuwari sawatikum. Right? So the physical adornment is rishan, is something you wear like feathers. But the libas that yuwari sawatikum, that covers your evil qualities, is libasu taqwa. And look at the connections. This is the two sons of Adam, right? And this is about the children of Adam and the story of Adam. And the quality of taqwa right? Because he said, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Remember? Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen. That's what he told him. And here, libasu taqwa, dhalika khayr, right? So libasu taqwa, huwa ma yuwari sawatikum. It's what covers your evil qualities. And in that verse that we're studying, he said, liyuriyahu kayfa yuwari sawata akhi. To show him how to cover, how to have. This is what taqwa is. This is what taqwa is. You cover the evil things, right? So we go back to that story in chapter 5. He said, wa alaikum salam Hafsa, right? He said, kayfa yuwari sawata akhi. He showed him, he came and was searching to show him how to conceal the evil qualities of his brother. Then he realized, qala ya waylata a'ajaztu an akuna mithla hadha al-ghurab fa uwariya sawata akhi fa asbaha min an-nadimin. He said, woe to me, like woe is it, have I become incapable, have I became weak, a'ajaztu an akuna mithla hadha al-ghurab, that I could be like this crow, fa uwariya sawata akhi. Alhamdulillah, salam Anna, thank you so much. That I would conceal the evil qualities of my brother, fa asbaha min an-nadimin, and he became of the regretful. 2197. Let me see. What nur? Oh yeah. وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Is that the part you're talking about? وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمْهُ اللَّهُ وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Yeah. And take provisions, and the best provision is taqwa. Yeah, the best provision is taqwa, subhanAllah. وَلِبَاسُ تَقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ. Good connection. So you see, when you look at the story from this angle, I like the color especially. When you look at the story from this angle, it's a completely different story. It's a story about self-righteousness, right? It's a story about covering the evil qualities that you see in other people. And the crow teaches us that when we come and search, our searching should not be a searching to reveal. It should be a searching that is a covering search, right? We shouldn't always, our main goal shouldn't always be the self-righteousness of like trying to like expose the evil in everyone, right? Of course, there's a time and a place when people are being wronged. Don't get me wrong. Allah says, "La yuhibbullahu al-jahra bis-su'i min al-qawli illa man dhulim." Allah does not love for evil to be publicized, except for the one who has been wronged. Okay, so I don't want anyone to misunderstand it and think that I'm saying you should cover people that's doing wrong towards others or oppressors or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the story is a lesson, perhaps, in not becoming self-righteous because you feel like you got it all figured out, or you're doing good things, or you have so much knowledge, or you have so many good deeds, or you got the best stove, or whatever it might be, right? The story teaches us that self-righteousness could actually lead us to killing other people if we don't keep that in check and remember that just because we might see another person and look at them as being a sinner, we don't know where that person is at with Allah, right? So it's a really beautiful way to like think about the story differently. And then when you go to the next verse, subhanAllah, look how the next verse connects with the story of the crow. He says, "Min ajli dhalika katabna ala bani Isra'ila." It's because of that we prescribed upon Bani Israel, أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا. We prescribed upon Bani Israel that the one who kills a soul, not in recompense for a soul or corruption in the earth, then it is as if he has killed all of humanity. وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. And whoever brings one to life, it's as if he brought all of humanity to life. Now, why are the story of the two sons of Adam, why is it connected to this verse? Salam. Why is it connected to this verse where he says, because of that, min ajli dhalika? It's because of that we prescribe this upon Bani Israel, that the one who kills a soul, بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ أَوْ فَسَادٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ, it's as if, yeah, exactly. Good catch, Nord. The verse is showing that we're all one. So the crow, when the crow comes and searches, it searches to protect the community. It doesn't search to kill this person. It searches to make sure no one else is being killed. So perhaps the connection between those is that it's showing us that the killing of any one person is like the killing of us all. We need to look at what happened, and we need to investigate that, and we need to investigate it from the perspective of yuwari, of the perspective of how do we conceal these evil things from affecting the community as a whole, and vice versa. You know, when anyone is brought to life, it's like all of us have been brought to life. So our searching should be in a way to bring all of us to life. And that coincides with other places in the Quran too, because he tells us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann, inna ba'da adh-dhanni itham, wa la tajassasu, wa la yaghtab ba'dukum ba'da, ayuhibbu ahadukum an ya'kula lahma akhihi maytan fakarihtumuh. He says, "Oh, you have believed, avoid much suspicion, for truly some suspicion is itham." See, itham, same word, itham. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا, and don't spy. وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا, and don't backbite one another, right? So the Quran, teaches us these etiquettes of like not being in people's business, basically. Not feeling like you always have to like look for the flaw and put a person down. That it's okay to like see another person that might not be doing the same things that you're doing, and be able to overlook that, as long as it's, of course, not something that is causing injustice to someone. Of course, we want to stand up against injustice at all times, but we're just talking about like in general, how we see that people that follow certain perspectives in religion, how they start to look down upon other people and become self-righteous. Perhaps that's something that this story teaches us. Yeah, and encourages us to help, even if it's just one person, right? And then when you look at this story as a whole, right? Look how this way of thinking about the story coincides with other places in this chapter. Look at verse 8, for example. In verse 8, he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have believed, kunu qawwamina lillahi shuhada'a bil qist. Be those who are standing for Allah as witnesses with justice. وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. He says, and do not let the hatred of a people cause you أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, that you don't do justice. اعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Be just, do justice. That is nearer to a taqwa. What taqullah? Look how he references taqwa. And in that story, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. The Allah only accepts from the muttaqeen. So Allah is teaching, taqwa shouldn't make you be unjust. اعْدِلُوا, be just. هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. That is nearer to taqwa. وَاتَّقُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. And if you go back even further to verse 2, he says, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ أَنْ صَدُّوكُمْ عَنِ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ أَنْ تَعْتَدُوا. He says, and don't let the hatred of people because they have prevented you, blocked you from al-Masjid al-Haram, don't let that cause you أَنْ تَعْتَدُوا, to transgress. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, and help one another upon righteousness and taqwa. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ, and don't help one another on sin and transgression. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and have taqwa of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Okay? Which version of that story fits these verses more? The version that the person who was killed was the person who it was accepted from, and the other person was envious. Where is envy here? Where is envy in Surah Al-Ma'idah? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I don't see it. It might be here somewhere. But all I see is like being just, not transgressing, right? Um, all these different things. We also see in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Let's look at another connection here. If I can find this verse real quick, we see in Surah Al-Ma'idah the emphasis on people distorting words from their proper places. In verse 41, in the middle of it, he says, "Yuharrifun al-kalima min ba'di mawadi'ihi." They distort their word. They distort the words min ba'di mawadi'ihi, after mawadi'ihi, after their proper places. And he said about the story of the two sons of Adam. What did he say? He said, and this is verse 41. So this is not too many verses after the verse that we just read, right? And he said, "Utlu alayhim, watlu alayhim, naba abnei adama bil haq," with truth. Recite the story with truth, right? And he speaks about people distorting the words from their places. And then, if you go like towards the end of the surah, what verse is that? I mean, many verses like that support this way of thinking about it. Like verse 105. He says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, alaykum anfusakum." Oh, you have believed, alaykum anfusakum. Be concerned with yourself. La yadurrukum man dalla idha ihtadaytum. Those who went astray will not harm you if you are guided. Why would he tell us that in this surah? In connection, thinking about those verses. And then when you go to, what verse was that? There was another verse that I was specifically looking for, but I think all these verses fit, that general theme, right? So when you look at the story like this, subhanAllah, it becomes a very beautiful lesson in self-righteousness, in transgression, in feeling like you got it all figured out, and therefore the people that don't follow the way that you follow are sinners. They should be eliminated. They're apostates. They left the religion. They, all these different things. May Allah give you what you deserve. All these things. I know the hadith of Abu Bakr. He said, "You guys are using the verse wrong." I thought about that when I read it. Subhanallah, man, how one statement can take away the beauty of an ayah, if that's what you're referring to. I'm familiar with that, but yeah, all these different things, subhanallah, that people say because they come from this position of like self-righteousness, because they feel like they have been guided. Alaykum anfusakum la yadurrukum man dalla idha ihtadaytum. So it has nothing to do with envy. I would say that's one perspective of the story, but the words of the story, that as it's presented in the Quran, lends itself to the possibility of having a different perspective, and that perspective, at least to me, seems to fit more with the surah as a whole, right? But that's not to say that way of looking at this story is invalid, right? So we want to apply the same thing that I'm saying about anyone else. We want to apply that to ourselves too. So if a person chose to look at that story from that perspective, I wouldn't say that that's invalid. That's an invalid way to look at it. I would just say that personally, I prefer this way of looking at it. It fits with the Surah Al-Ma'idah as a whole. It fits with the message of the Quran as a whole. And I think it has a beautiful meaning. It has a lot to teach us. And it even fits with what they say about Surah Al-Ma'idah from a historical perspective. That we have this verse in it, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Today I have perfected your religion. So there is a fear that we would become arrogant. So this story perhaps is here to remind us of not becoming like that. So I thought it was a really good thing that I wanted to like just share for today, just for us to think about, that like this whole perspective, like when we kind of like leave the Salafi Sunni traditional, that kind of rigid way of thinking, and then we become more Quran focused, Quran centric, Quran only, however you want to think about yourself, it's up to you. But when we become like that, I've noticed a trend that we become almost like, I used this phrase yesterday, we become like Quran Salafis, where we still have the same rigid mentality. It's just about the Quran now. and I don't think that that's beneficial in trying to like make a real change, because we're not really changing in that case. Now, next, inshallah, is malakat aymanukum. That's our next discussion, because that was a big discussion in uh in Warner's live today, and I wanted to share some thoughts about it. So inshallah, that'll be our next class, hopefully tomorrow. I already pretty much have an idea of like how I want to approach that from some of the verses, but I do want to sit down and like organize my thoughts a little bit more, inshallah. So with that, I think I'm going to close for the day. It's just, no, it doesn't mean your right hand possesses. Ayman, your ayman, right? Where does he use ayman at in the Quran? Just real quick. Malakat aymanukum. Malakat aymanukum. Even the word yameen, yeah, inshallah, same, Dr. Boss. I appreciate you always stopping through, man. Even the word yameen, subhanAllah, the word yameen, even just in Arabic, al-yumnu is al-baraka, right? Al-yumnu is blessings, right? That's why my name in Arabic, even though some people like to associate it with a Jewish name, because some people that are Jewish have the name, but that's the name that I was born with, was Benjamin. So I took the Arabic of that when I first became Muslim, and I started going by Bin Yamin, and it's a beautiful name, Bin Yamin. But I remember there was this one brother that I had a really close connection with, way back in the day. This was probably like in the early 2000s. He's a brother from Palestine, and he refused to call me Bin Yamin. He would call me Ibnu Yamin. He would say, "Ya Ibnu Yamin." Every time he saw me, he called me Ibnu Yamin. And then there was this other brother. His name was Abu Ashraf. I still remember this brother's name. I love this brother, older brother, but he loved the Quran. Like, it's all he did was like memorize and recite the Quran. And he would tell me, your name not Bin Yamin anymore. This name for the Jews. He said, your name Yusuf. So I said, well, okay, if that's the case, your name isn't Abu Ashraf. Your name is Musa. You're going to change my name. I'm going to change your name. But it's just, subhanAllah, man. It's just that superstitious thinking that we've been taught. You know, just because people have a name, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, it's their name. And it's the name I was born with. But Bin Yamin, the son of Yamin, Ibnu Yamin. What is Yamin? Yusuf and Binyamin were full brothers. Yeah, right. So Yamin, al-yumnu fil Arabi, huwa al-baraka, blessings, right? So Ibnu Yamin is the son of blessings. SubhanAllah, that's a beautiful name, actually. It's unfortunate that some very evil people also have that name, but it's a beautiful name in and of itself, right? So Yamin, these are just some of my random reflections I be having. So, like, you know, when you at the end of the class, this is when the dark web gets darker, because that's when I just started, you know, giving you some random stuff. So this is just stuff I be thinking about. You know, how when people say "Kul bi yaminik," eat with your yamin. How I take that, I mean, I don't think that's even, personally. I know some people wouldn't like this, but I don't really think that's important. But I've thought about that over the years, because I remember, subhanAllah, I remember this one brother asked me a long time ago. Yeah, I remember. So if you stay to the end of class, that's when you get the dark web. So this one brother asked me like a long time ago. He was he had a relationship, and he was talking about the woman he was in a relationship with, and I guess she was learning about Islam or whatever the case was. This was years ago. And yeah, alhamdulillah, nothing wrong with being a lefty. You're gonna like this explanation. Let me give you this explanation. So just my random thoughts of how I think about it. I'm not saying this is what it is, just how I think about it. So I remember the brother asked me, he said, man, you know, she's left-handed, and I want to teach her like to eat with her right hand, but it's very difficult for her. Like, what kind of advice should I give? And I was fooled in those times. That was about 2000, 2001, maybe 2002. So I was in it to win it as far as like Salafi. So in my head, like I don't know if she's born left-handed, it doesn't matter. Like she gonna have to figure that out. But at the same time, I still approach things with wisdom. I tried to, which what I thought was wisdom. So what I told him was, I said, well, maybe, try to like, because you have to kind of like rewire your brain a little bit. So maybe start slow, like tell her to do certain things, like maybe try to brush her teeth with her left hand a little bit, and maybe that'll start like getting her right hand. Sorry, I mixed up with her right hand. That'll get her used to, her brain like used to using that hand. So I thought that was clever. Now I look at it now, it's like so simple minded. But I was probably in my early 20s at the time. So over the years, I've thought about this more, right? SubhanAllah. There's a hadith actually that says it speaks about Allah, and it refers to an yamin al-Rahman. It says an yamin al-Rahman. Oh, I don't know what was the end of that story with those two. I never heard anything else after that, so I don't know what the end of that story was. But it's funny. Side point. I'm gonna explain this more, but it's funny, right? It's funny, bro. Like people, and this wasn't the case with this guy or this brother, because at the time I was still Salafi. But what I've noticed over the years, some of the brothers that I was around when I was like hardcore Salafi, and they're not like that level, but they're still like traditional, and they don't agree with like a lot of my positions. But when they have difficult questions, they ask me. So this one brother asked me one time. He had these two women he was gonna marry, and like he just asked me some weird questions, bro. I'm not even gonna get into it, but I was like, man, that's crazy. So, you mean to tell me like when I'm talking about some general stuff about the Quran, like you aren't really interested in that, but like when you want to know about some freaky stuff, and if that's Islamic or not, you can ask me. It's like, bro, oh, people are crazy, bro. No, I'm not Salafi anymore. But I told you this is dark web. So anyway, so over the years about the the right hand thing, as far as eating. So what I've thought about is there's a hadith where he says an yamin al-Rahman, right? No, it's not bad. It's not bad. On like if you translate it literally, an yamin al-Rahman, on the right hand of ar-Rahman. If you translate yamin literally, but then the hadith goes on to say, wa tilka yadayhi yamin. Both of his hands are right hands. SubhanAllah, how are both of his hands right hands? So I thought about that over the years, and I realized that al-yumnu, al-yamin, al-yumnu means barakah. It means blessings, right? And then if you think about the Quran, how the Quran expresses the hands of Allah, he says, bal yadahu mabsutatani. Both of his hands are outstretched, right? Yunfiqu kayfa yasha, I think the rest of the verse is. He spends however he wills. So I realized this. I said, SubhanAllah, maybe that's the meaning of what kilta yadehi yamin. Both of his hands are yamin. Not right in the very limited way that we think about it, but there's no deficiency, because he says, bal yadahu mabsutatan. His hands are outstretched. So there's no deficiency, however you think of yad, because yad, I think of it as being like an expression of like power, right? Because he said about Adam, khalaqtu, what did he say? Khalaqtu biyaday, in Surah As-Sad. Khalaqtu biyaday. That I created him with my two hands, with my two yad, right? Perhaps meaning like my two powers. Yeah, kilta yadehi yamin. Both of his hands are yamin. Meaning like when we think of ourselves as being handed, like right-handed or left-handed, that means you have a dominant hand and you do most of the things with that, right? So that's your strong hand, right? The things that you can do, if you play sports, you shoot a basketball with. If you box, your right hand, that's your power hand. But when it comes to Allah, kilta yadehi yamin. Both of his hands are yamin. He doesn't have a weak hand. He doesn't have a dominant hand. Bal yadahu mabsutatani, right? So how I've come to understand kul bi yaminik, eat with your yamin, is your yamin is whatever your dominant hand is, right? So if you're left-handed, your yamin is your left hand. and Allah knows best. That's how I understand it now. But I reflect on that from my name, Ibnu Yamin, bin Yamin, the son of Yamin, not son of the right hand, which is how some people translate it, son of blessings, right? Or product of blessings. And then if you look at what about receiving your book in your Yamin? Yeah, that's a good question. Perhaps it has something to do with that as well. Like receiving your book bi yaminik is like, okay, so if we think about that like from a spiritual perspective, does it matter if it's like literally my right hand, like my dominant hand? Like what does that have to do with like spiritual stuff? You follow what I'm saying? So if we think about yamin in the sense of bi yaminik, like the place of blessing, you know, perhaps it has something to do with that. It's like the way that you receive it has to do with like the way that you lived, be yaminik, by your yamin. You know, your kitab will be blessed. It will be, your record will be blessed. Something of that nature. We have to study it more to think of how to explain it. But what I'm trying to say is it doesn't make sense, at least to me, that the particular hand that you have in this world would matter. Like, oh, because my right hand is dominant, so therefore, you know, I have to receive everything in my right hand. And I think that's a more open-minded and universal way of thinking about the concept of yamin, because it's really not fair, you know, to vilify people that are left-handed, and to tell them, you know, that if they're naturally left-handed, that they have to force themselves to like eat with their right hand and do stuff with their right hand, you know, stuff like that. Right. So for me, yeah, I just think it's yeah, both hands. Like exactly. That's a good point, Rose Peach. Like I don't think like we should be thinking about a part of our body that is bad. Like low key, that's kind of body shaming if you really think about it, right? Especially for people that's naturally left-handed. You know what I mean? Like why would Allah, why would the deen like care about what hand you like what your dominant hand is, right? And like all throughout history, you know, the left, you know, is oftentimes thought about as being like negative, and the right, you know, is the good thing. Some people only have one hand as well. So going from that though to the word ayman. So if you look at this word ayman in the Quran, right? Ma malakat aymanukum. We're going to study this in more detail, but I just give you a quick little preview, a little dark web preview of what we're talking about. So there's some interesting things about this phrase, ma malakat aymanukum. First of all, the word ayman itself, right? Like if you look in 589, so if you look in chapter 5, verse 89, somebody's alarm is going crazy, which is the surah that we were just studying, oddly enough. He says, لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم. Allah does not hold you to account or punish you for اللغو في أيمانكم, in your ayman. In your ayman means what? It means your oaths, right? ولكن يؤاخذكم بما عقدتم الأيمان. But rather he holds you to account for what you have عقدتم الأيمان, for the ayman that you have aqada, you have like knotted. The word aqada, like uqda, you made it a knot, you bound it, you tied it firmly, right? Bima aqadtum al-ayman, right? So it shows like the word ayman, it doesn't mean like, when the Quran uses it, you don't see it really referencing like right hands. There's a couple verses you can kind of take it like that. We'll explore those verses more. But if you read through these verses, you see that ayman is used to reference oaths. So for another example is 1691. And this isn't, by the way, this isn't a full, like tonight isn't going to be a full explanation of malakat aymanukum, because I want to study it a little bit more and like put the verses together a little bit more. But these are just some quick observations just to start thinking about what it means. So 1691, he says, وَأَوْفُوا بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ إِذَا عَاهَدْتُمْ وَلَا تَنْقُضُ الْأَيْمَانَ بَعْدَ تَوْكِيدِهَا. He says, and fulfill completely the covenant of Allah when you have made a covenant, and do not violate the oaths. Al-ayman, وَلَا تَنْقُضُ الْأَيْمَانَ, or don't break the oaths. بَعْدَ تَوْكِيدِهَا, after their tawkid, after like binding them firmly. Right? So here the ayman is spoken of as being something that you do tawkid with. You bind them firmly. Right? And then in the next verse he says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّتِي نَقَضَتْ غَزْلَهَا مِنْ بَعْدِ قُوَّةٍ أَنْكَاثًا تَتَّخِذُونَ أَيْمَانَكُمْ دَخَلًا بَيْنَكُمْ أَنْ تَكُونَ أُمَّةٌ هِيَ أَرْبَى مِنْ أُمَّةٍ. And don't be like the one who unraveled her weaving or her threading after quwwah, after strength, and kathan, into many different hold on, bro. What's bruh doing, bro? Bruh bugging, man. Okay. And don't be like the one who unraveled her weaving after strength, and kathan, into many different threads, right? تَتَّخِذُونَ أَيْمَانَكُمْ دَخَلًا بَيْنَكُمْ, taking your oaths as دَخَلًا بَيْنَكُمْ, as a place of entrance between you, right? A place of, that's an interesting phrase. Taking your oaths as a place of entrance amongst you. So it's your oaths, right? By the way, I don't know if I've shared this recently. I think I've shared this before because the guy was asking about my squirrel. But I don't care about him, but you guys might find it interesting. The squirrel is because of my wife. That's originally why I did that. That's a tribute to my wife. My wife loves squirrels. She loves feeding squirrels. She made me love them. So now every time I see a squirrel, it's like, aw, so cute. So the squirrel was something I did for my wife. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, just to share that in case you wonder why that's my profile picture. That's why I haven't changed it. I thought about changing it before. Just from time to time I just change, just do different stuff. But the reason I didn't change that is because it's for her personally. So if I do change it, maybe I'll change it to something else for her. But I like that. And I like the softness of it too. Because like squirrels are really interesting. When you watch them and how they move and like the things that they do, like there's a certain softness to it, but there's also a certain like elegance to it, right? So squirrels are beautiful. Anyway, let's go back to Ayman. So another verse, let's go to another verse. 9:12 is another verse. The squirrel, Sinjab, As-Sinjab. Maybe that should be one of my names. As-Sinjab, the squirrel. I'm fine with that. Squirrels are amazing. One time, this is no lie, bro. I know this is going to sound like I'm making this up, but I promise I'm not. My wife witnessed this. I wish we had this on video. But there was a squirrel in our backyard, and I think she was pregnant, and she was like across the yard. And I was just joking. I didn't really know that this was going to happen. So I was like, I pointed at her and I was like, and no joke, she did this. Not with the eyes, but she pointed her little, I don't know if they call them paws, whatever they call them. Like, almost like she was saying, me? And I don't know if that was just a coincidence. I don't know what that was, but that literally happened, I promise. And she came closer and closer and almost came up to me. And I never used one word. I just kept doing like this as she kept coming closer and closer. I promise you that happened. So anyway, so 9:12 is another good example of the use of the word ayman. So here in 9:12 he says, وَإِن نَكَثُوا أَيْمَانَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ عَهْدِهِمْ, if they violate their oaths after مِنْ بَعْدِ عَهْدِهِمْ, after their covenant, right? So again, it's used in the context of oaths, ayman. Okay, so now look at a couple of these verses with the phrase مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Now we're going to go back through a lot of this tomorrow, inshallah, because I want to study this a little bit more. But these are just some beginning thoughts. So if you look at 424, 424 is a good one to start with. No, 425. 425 is a good one to start with. 425 is interesting because I think 425 allows us to see what malakat aymanukum is not. Because the way that people explain it is, as we know, is these are like concubines or slaves, all that stuff, right? But look at 425. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طَوْلًا أَنْ يَنْكِحَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ مِنْ فَتَيَاتِكُمُ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. So the one who is not able to marry al-muhsanat al-mu'minat. So we have to study. This is why I said we need to study this more, because we want to study and pin down a little bit more what is al-muhsanat al-mu'minat, outside of the inherited interpretations. Okay? But something about the believing women who are muhsanat. But whoever is not able to marry them, then he says, فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Then from those that your oaths possess. This is another important point before I forget. We have to be precise too in the wording, because usually when this is talked about in general Islamic discussions, they call it, what do they call it? Mulku Yamin. But Allah never called it that in the Quran. Allah never said Mulku Yamin as a noun. Mulku Yamin. It's always a verb. Malakat Aymanukum. Okay? So we need to keep that separately. And I think that's how a lot of different misconceptions come about too. Like when we don't keep the wording precise. So he said, whoever isn't able to marry this category, al-muhsanat al-mu'minat, فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Then from those your oaths possess. We're going to talk more about this word too. Min fatayatikum al-mu'minat. So he defines it. Min fatayatikum al-mu'minat. From your fatayat al-mu'minat. From your not believing, but mu'minat, like we talked about. Those who give security. Fatayatikum. Okay? So what is fatayatikum? What is this word fatayat? Okay? So we find variations of this word throughout the Quran. Like for masculine would be feta, feta. So we find Ibrahim, for example, called feta. They said sami'na fatan yadhkuruhum, when they were talking about who did this to our idols. They said sami'na fatan yadhkuruhum. We heard a feta. They translate it as we heard a young man, right? But we heard a feta. Exactly, like Musa. Musa had a feta that accompanied him. Yusuf had fityan that were helping him, because he said, وَقَالَ لِفِتْيَانِهِ اجْعَلُوا بِضَاعَتَهُمْ فِي رِحَالِهِمْ. He said to his fityan, right? So if you look at this, he said place their property in their saddlebags. So if you look at the translation of this word in different places in the Quran, they might translate it as a servant, a young man. In the case of Ibrahim, they translate it differently. But if you think about the context, feta perhaps is something like to put it in more like modern terms, feta is something like an intern, something like an apprentice, something like that. So Melek, from this verse, and Allah knows best, who has less responsibility? From this verse, ma malakat aymanukum, or an assistant, ma malakat aymanukum min fatayatikum al-mu'minat, is speaking about a different social level. It's speaking about relationships on a different social level. So in other words, a doctor working at a hospital who has maybe medical students or interns or whatever working with them, they're on a different social level, right? So there's power imbalances. Sometimes there might be age imbalance, right? Not that they're not of age, not that they're not adults, but there's an imbalance here in the social status, right? So that's why this group of people is referred to as different than azwaj. Illa ala azwajihim aw ma malakat aymanukum. So the azwaj, the zoj, is someone that you connect with more on equal terms. Ma malakat aymanukum is someone who is fata, as this verse defines it, min fatayatikum, right? Um, that's just some starting thoughts. We need to study this more. So I'm not saying like this is the conclusion. I'm just giving some reflections from the words itself. And if we look just in the world, that way of thinking about it makes sense in the terms of like, why would Allah discuss that in a different category? Because there's a lot of danger that comes with that, right? There's a lot of danger when you have these power imbalances. So this is something that needs to be, when you read the rest of the verse, look what Allah said. Wallahu a'lamu bi imanikum, and Allah knows best about your iman. Ba'dukum min ba'd, you are from each other. Does this sound like Allah is talking about slaves, bro? Like, I mean, for real. Like, he's not he's not talking about slaves, bro. Like, even if that interpretation that I just gave isn't all the way like 100%, we need to work on it more. But when you just read this verse, is why I started with this verse. This is not talking about slaves, because he just said ba'dukum min ba'd. You are part of each other, right? And then he says فَانْكِحُوهُنَّ بِإِذْنِ أَهْلِهِنَّ وَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. He says, marry them with the permission of their family and give them their ujur, right? Provide for them, give them what you're supposed to give them, their ujur, right? So does it sound like whether ujur means like we have to study that word too, because ujur could mean like give them their rights. It could mean sometimes it's translated as rewards. So I don't know if that's the best translation here. So we have to study like what is meant by that, right? But my point is, if you think about the way this is phrased here, after he spoke about fatayatikum, or after he spoke about ma malakat aymanukum, what your ayman possesses, what your oaths possess, he then said, marry them with the permission of their family. So if this was like the traditional narrative of what your right hands possess, these are war captives, and then you could just do whatever you want with them, right? Does that make sense that Allah would say marry them by the permission of their family? So I mean, first of all, if you're at war and you're taking captives, how are you going to talk to their family? And you're gonna what, ask their family for someone that you took as a captive? They're gonna say absolutely not. Return my family back to me. Like, what are you even talking about? So like the verse itself, I think, shows you that that's not what it means, right? Now, if you go to another verse, right? And I think, well, let me say one other thing. If you keep reading down the verse perhaps even gives us an indication that if that's the correct interpretation, that this represents like a different social level, the verse gives us an indication that that's not the best way to go. Not that it's not permissible, right? But that, like, if you're in these different situations with these power imbalances, like, that's not the best way to go, because the end of the verse says, ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ الْعَنَةَ مِنْكُمْ وَأَنْ تَصْبِرُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. He said that you are patient is better for you. Wallahu ghafur rahim. So he's saying, like, you technically could, but that you are patient is better. So it's better for you to not go that route, right? It's better for you to have azwaj, the people that are equal to you, right? The people that there's not this danger of this power imbalance. So that's a completely different way of thinking about these verses. And then there's another interesting verse, which is 24:33. So if we go to 24:33, is really interesting too. He says, وَلْيَسْتَعْفِفِ الَّذِينَ لَا يَجِدُونَ نِكَاحًا حَتَّى يُغْنِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. And those who do not find nikah, don't find like the ability of marriage, let them have iffa, let them have be chaste, like restrain themselves. حتى يغنيهم الله من فضله, until Allah enriches them of their bounty. وَالَّذِينَ يَبْتَغُونَ الْكِتَابَ مِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Okay, let's think about this. Then those who seek the kitab. So now I believe it's been a while since I like read translations of this, but I believe how they translate the seeking of the kitab here is they mean like seeking, because they think automatically, automatically they think mimma malakat aymanukum means slaves. So they think seeking the kitab means seeking a contract like of freedom or something like that. But where else in the Quran do we have an expression like this? If you go to chapter 2, so if you go to chapter 2, right, and just look in the verses about marriage and divorce, he says in verse 235, وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِيمَا عَرَّضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ أَوْ أَكْنَنْتُمْ فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. He said, there is no sin upon you in what you present of خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ, of proposing to women, أَوْ أَكْنَنْتُمْ فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, or you keep it hidden within yourselves. عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ سَتَذْكُرُونَهُنَّ. Allah knows that you will remember them. وَلَكِنْ لَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا. However, don't promise them something secretly. See, the whole idea is secret, like hiding things in secret. إِلَّا أَن تَقُولُوا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, except that you say قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, so a good statement. وَلَا تَعْزِمُوا عُقْدَةَ النِّكَاحِ, and don't firmly resolve the uqda of nikah, the knot of marriage, حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ, until the kitab reaches its ajal, reaches its appointed time. So what does the kitab refer to here? Maybe it refers to like the time period of like waiting after they get divorced, or something of that nature. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, however we interpret it, it's not a stretch to think of 2433, the use of the word kitab, as referring to something having to do with marriage, because he uses the same word in 235, which has to do with divorce and marriage, until the kitab reaches its ajal. So in 2433, he says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبْتَغُونَ الْكِتَابَ مِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ إِنْ عَلِمْتُمْ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا وَآتُوهُمْ مِنْ مَالِ اللَّهِ الَّذِي آتَاكُمْ. Right? He says, those who seek the kitab from those that your oaths possess, فَكَاتِبُوهُمْ, then engage in this contract with them, if you know goodness in them. وَآتُوهُمْ, and give them, مِنْ مَالِ اللَّهِ الَّذِي آتَاكُمْ, from the wealth of Allah, that He has given you. وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ. Look at that. Do not compel your fatayats. See, the same word that was used in the other verse, right? فَمِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ مِنْ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. And here he says, مِمَّا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ. Don't compel your fatayats. Don't compel your interns. Don't compel your assistants. عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ, upon bigha. What is bigha? What did Maryam say? وَلَمْ أَكُ بَغِيًّا. Is that the exact way she said it? Am I remembering that right? Let me double check that. Yeah, وَلَمْ أَكُ بَغِيًّا. She said, قَالَتْ أَنَّا يَكُونُ لِي غُلَامٌ. How would I have a boy? وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْنِي بَشَرٌ, when no human being has touched me. وَلَمْ أَكُ بَغِيًّا, and I have not been a baghi. Right? So something having to do with like, intimate relations, however we translate that. So he says here in 33, وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ. Don't compel them. So that right there invalidates that whole traditional narrative, because the way that they explain it is pretty much like you can just do what you want. Like that's your right. You have these captives of war. You can do what you want. But he just said here, وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ إِنْ أَرَدْنَا تَحَسُّنًا. Don't compel them upon this if they intend tahassun, to be chaste and protect themselves and guard themselves. لِتَبْتَغُوا عَرَضَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, so that you can seek the properties of this world, of al-hayat dunya. That's exactly, that whole narrative is exactly what they're saying. They're saying for the properties of this world. Like there's actually a hadith where they say that some of the companions had taken women in war, and they went to this is 2433, and they asked the Prophet, where, I forget the exact wording of it, but you could look it up. But they basically said like, it's killing us that we're away from our wives. Can we pull out? Now, this is a hadith. I'm sorry for being a little. This is actual hadith, and he said you don't have to not do it because any soul that's meant to be born will be born. So look at this hadith, right? And compare that to what Allah is saying here. وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ. Don't compel them and seeking this world. That's exactly what they were thinking. That's exactly what people like that who have that narrative are. What else are they seeking? But then they say we follow our desires because we want to follow the Quran. They say we're emotional, right? How much more emotional can you get than that? How much more following your desires can you get than that? Every accusation is a confession, right? So then he says, "In aradna tahassunan litabtaghu arad al-hayat ad-dunya wa man yukrihhunna fa inna Allaha min ba'di ikrahihinna ghafur rahim." He said, and whoever compels them, then Allah is forgiving and merciful after their compulsion. Now, after that doesn't mean for the people that compelled them. I don't believe. I believe that's for the women being compelled. It's letting them know that you're not. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not impure. You're not any of these things because you were compelled to do this. So subhanAllah, these verses, in my opinion, completely invalidate the way that they describe what is malakat aymanukum. Another verse. Let's go to another verse. 436. We're going to go to 436. But we follow our desires though. 436. He says, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا, and worship Allah and do not associate anything with Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and do ihsan with the parents. Do ihsan. Do ihsan. Do beautiful things. The word ihsan coming from husn, or related to husn, beauty. Do beautiful things with your parents. وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى, and the near relatives. وَالْيَتَامَى, and the orphans. وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, and the poor. وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْجَارِ الْجُنُبِ, and the neighbor who is of near relatives and the neighbor who is a stranger. وَالصَّاحِبِ بِالْجَنْبِ, and the companion by your side. وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and the traveler. وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, and those that your oaths possess. SubhanAllah, he listed وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ amongst who? Amongst your parents, your relatives, the poor, the neighbor that's near kin, the neighbor that's a stranger, the companion by your side, the traveler, and those who ayman, those who your ayman possess, right? Your oaths, right? You mean to tell me like that he said we should do ihsan to all these qualities, and these are talking about slave captive women that you can do anything that you want with, and he said to do ihsan and included them with your parents and your relatives and the orphans and the poor. Is that what Allah is telling us in this beautiful book? الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ, those who listen to the word and follow what is most beautiful of it. Most beautiful. Is that the most beautiful way of thinking about that? SubhanAllah. So I think like that's a quick little overview of some of what I want to talk about. But I think there's more verses that need to be explored. I don't think that what I said completely covers like all of the verses. We need to study it more, because it is a complex subject. So I don't want to make it seem like as it's that simple that we could just dismiss it. But I think those verses really shed light on the fact that that's not what it means. Like the brother Warner said, the brother Warner said today. He said, I'm not sure what exactly it means, but I know what it doesn't mean. And sometimes that's powerful, because sometimes through eliminating what it doesn't mean, then we can start to arrive at more of an idea of what it does mean, right? Wa alaikum salam. So inshallah, I just seen a text from my wife come across the screen, so I think she's coming to pick me up, because I had her drop me off because she had to do some running around. So I said, man, drop me off at the park, man. I'm going live with this. I'm in the booth. I'm in the studio, bro. Drop me off. Drop me off with my equipment. I brought this because originally, the other place that I like to sit under the tree, I usually set this up. But I went over there, man. I was so mad. I was like, the one day no one ever sits under this tree, and the one day I want to go sit over there, somebody's sitting over there. So I had to find another place. So I found this over here. So I'm going to go ahead and go for today. How are the differences in the 10 qira'at reconciled? That's another topic. I talked about that yesterday, actually. Ask Ibn Shanbud how they're reconciled. Salamun alaikum. Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you guys, man. Love you guys as always. Appreciate you guys coming through to the dark web of Quranic studies. Yeah, ask Ibn Shanbud about it. No, I'm just messing with you. We talked about Ibn Shanbud yesterday. Inshallah, that our live from yesterday will also be posted. I thought I posted it today, but I actually accidentally posted the wrong one. Like I posted the same one twice, and I just noticed that when I was on my way over here, so I deleted it, and I need to. But so the live from yesterday and today will be posted hopefully sometime soon. Assalamu alaikum. See you guys later. Deleted it, and I need to. But so the live from yesterday and today will be posted hopefully sometime soon. Assalamu alaikum. See you guys later.